and welcome to our Lib-Con best graphic novels, or our favorite graphic novels. We won't say best graphic novels because that's up for debate. I'm Sara Chesney, and I'm an adult service librarian here at the library, and today I'm joined by Rebecca and Caitrin, and we're going to talk about our favorite comic books. Why don't you two introduce yourself? Starting with Caitrin. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Caitrin. I am the emerging tech librarian at the library, and I don't purchase comic books, but I have lots of favorites, so I'm here to share.
And hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm the teen and tween librarian here, and I purchase teen and tween graphic novels.
And like I said, I'm Sara, and I purchase graphic novels for adults. So we're going to start with Rebecca, who's going to start us off and talk about her first recommendation for her first favorite graphic novel.
Well, sure. I'm really excited because this first one is a new comic book. We just got it in, and it is called Chunky by Yehudi Mercado. And it's about a boy, Yehudi, who is a little overweight, and his doctors are a little concerned. His parents are very concerned because when he was a kid, he had a lung infection that cost him half his lungs. He had a couple surgeries. And so they're concerned about his health deteriorating. So they decide Yehudi needs to get into sports. And Yehudi is a very cheerful and funny and energetic kid. So he's like, sure, why not? In the meantime, trying to find somebody who will understand him, he has an imaginary friend named Chunky, who also becomes his mascot and cheerleader. It is an incredibly funny book. Yehudi is so charming and silly, and all he wants to do is make people laugh. He loves Saturday Night Live, and he is always trying to find a way to make people laugh. However, he's not necessarily talented at most sports. Most of the time he's being hit in the head with the ball, or there's this one mean bully kid who seems to be playing every single sport he tries. You'll know he's the bully because he's got sharp, pointy teeth, which I appreciated right away. It's a really, really sweet story because it's not just about him learning to find his own path, learning for his family to learn to accept him as he is. In the meantime, his father loses his job and has to move across the country to work for a few years. So there's, that's a trouble within their family. And throughout this entire time, Yehudi has his friend Chunky to cheer him along. So there's a lot of heart in this book. I would say anybody who loves Raina Telgemeier or Kayla Miller's Click series or any of those growing up great graphic novels that we have for tweens right now would love this book. But even more so because Yehudi is genuinely really funny. My favorite quote, and I feel like it definitely describes this book, is half the lungs, all the charm. So I would highly suggest Chunky by Yehudi Mercado, excuse me.
I love the art in that one. So
it's great
cute.
Art. Yeah.
Super cute.
I'm not familiar with this, so I'm very sad that you've kept this from me at this whole time.
It's brand new, so I feel like everybody's going to discover this one together.
Yes, and you do share an office together, so you probably turned around and went, "Hey, read this.
Read this right now."
The squad down there. Yeah. So my first recommendations is I Kill Giants by Joe Kelly and art by J.M. Ken Nomura. This was a limited series that was combined to one standalone comic. It was published in 2009. The series has won a number of series, including the Best Indie Book of 2008 by IGN. It made the New York Magazine's top 10 books of graphic novels of 2009. It was the top 10 Young Adult Library Services Association best books, and then in 2010. And it won a gold award at the 5th International Manga Awards in 2012. It was also turned into a movie. I did not watch it, so I can't give you a good feeling of how it translated. This is a coming-age tale of Barbara Thorson, who is battling monsters, both real and imaginary. Barbara is quick-witted, precocious, and a D&D dungeon master that you do not want to get on the wrong side of. When she's not fighting her sister or the bully at school, she, along with her new classmates, are setting up traps in preparation for an upcoming battle with giants. Throughout the novel, you are frequently questioning whether the giants or other mythological creatures are real or not. And you're wondering whether Barbara's escapism is starting to take over her life, which is definitely part of the appeal. This is actually a really tender story of loss and coping and friendship and bullies and what courage really means. It's depicted in a black and white manga style, or the illustrations. So care is given to the background and foreground, and sometimes the background doesn't exist at all. This graphic novel is great for those who are new to graphic novels and don't want to go to the commitment of some of the mangas that are currently on the market. In fact, this is one of the top graphic novels that I often recommend for people who are just starting to get interested. It is fantasy, so those who love fantasy, this is definitely something, especially if you love D&D, that is referenced quite a lot, but you do not need to know D&D to understand this book. I would encourage everyone to give this a try, and you don't need extensive knowledge of monsters. Just enjoy the book. It's such a sweet and sincere book. So that is I Kill Monsters by Joe Kelly and art by J.M. Ken Nomura.
Did you ever see the movie version of that, Sarah?
No.
Okay.
I said that, but that's okay. No, it was something that I was late to both games, so I definitely didn't read it until it became a movie, but I did not know it was a movie at the time. So I read this. I'm like, I'm going to give this some time because I like to forget what the actual book was, or so I can go watch it, have a fresh perspective on the movie, and then go back and read the book and go, oh yeah, they left everything out. This was actually a terrible movie.
I think it kind of came out, I felt like it came out around the same time as A Monster Calls, the movie, and I feel like they were kind of trying to ride that wave, which, and The Monster Calls movie was fine. So, but I feel like that was kind of, it might have been a bit rushed out. I didn't see the entire thing. It was fine. I'm sure the comic is better, so read the original material.
It's just such a good, like, if you like action or adventure, that also plays into it. But it's just such a, I recommend it. That's why it's here.
Great. Okay, well then I will go with my first recommendation, which is going to be The Wicked and the Divine. It's written by Kieran Gillen and with art by Jamie McKelvey. They have done a few things together. They're from Image Comics. Jamie McKelvey might be familiar to some people if you've read a lot of Marvel comics. He had a stint on Young Adventures. He's a pretty popular artist, really good art. And I think that really lends itself a lot to this book. Again, The Wicked and the Divine. So the premise of this book is that I think like every generation, I think it's like 90 or so years, 12 human beings are kind of transformed into the avatars of various gods and goddesses from a number of mythologies. It's not the same set every time, but the deal is they get these superpowers, they like instantly become famous and awesome, but they only live for 2 years following that. So it's like your literal 2 years of fame. And there's kind of more folded in, you know, you learn more about this system as the book progresses. There's kind of a mystery that you start out with. It does follow a girl named Laura, who is a fan of Amaterasu, who is kind of the pop star du jour of the day of this set. And I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers about what happens there, but it all has to do with like, you know, mythological intersections and kind of what you do with fame. It talks a lot about like how fame will change people, how like mortality kind of lumped in with that, you know, how you're just like spent up as a celebrity, that sort of thing. So a lot of those themes in there, and a lot of action. It gets a little bit graphic. So this is definitely an adult recommendation, or for, you know, older teens who are A-okay with that. We're not telling you how to live. One thing I did want to talk about a little bit in this book is kind of the art, and how this is a great example of why a graphic novel, a comic book, is a very different type of medium, not, you know, not lesser than regular books, you know, like, because a lot of the story is told through the pictures themselves. So you're reading the words, but you're interpreting a lot through the images. And I think Jamie McKelvey does an awesome job of sequential art. Sometimes you will follow the line of the art on the page instead of reading like across like you would in a book. So it's a whole different skill set, and I think just a really great way to absorb a story, because this one has like a lot of kind of weirdness to it, a lot of kind of themes in the background that you're seeing, where you think maybe this person isn't okay. Maybe there's more going on that is not good. So you see a lot of that, as well as like expressions on faces is another huge thing in this book. And I think that's done super well. And I think that, you know, if you've kind of passed on graphic novels before, this one is one that would definitely convince you that there's something apart from books. They're not a step that you take on your way to being able to read novels. You know, it's a whole different skill set. So that's why I really recommend this one. And it's fun as well. So you won't be bored, but it's also just a lot of enjoying the pictures and enjoying the kind of the storytelling through the graphics. So that is why I recommend The Wicked and the Divine by Caitrin Gillen, and with art by Jamie McKelvey.
And before we move on, the one thing I get asked a lot by adults in particular, and particularly those who don't like graphic novels, is like, why read them? They're just comics. Well, art literacy is a huge part of it. Being able to understand the pictures, what you're reading. A lot of people, for instance, we have things, classics. So we have manga classics. We have a whole bunch of classic literature like Mice and Men, Parabola of Sorrows, and stuff like that have been translated into graphic novels. And although there's limited reading in that you're only reading the dialogue between people or their mental thoughts, so much is being depicted in the background. And that's where a lot of what was written in the book is being translated. So it's either going to be heavily detailed as the author describes the details of the environment around them in the book, or it'll be delicate or not as much of a focus. It just depends on the intent of the author. And so often, that is one of my arguments as to why graphic novels should be taken seriously, is because it does take skill. It does take a while to learn how to read graphic novels, but as soon as you get the hang of it, you'll start to pick up on consistencies through authors or through other mediums such as manga. You'll be able to pick up on symbolism in different genres. And so I think it's very powerful in that.
Well, and to jump in on that, mm-hmm. I think it's just yet another format to exercise your brain. You're going to use your brain differently when you're reading words. You're going to use it different when you're listening to a story through audiobook or something. And you're going to use it differently if you're interpreting a story through pictures and text. So any way that you can diversely exercise your brain is going to be good for you.
And also, sorry, I just thought self-publication, because a lot of the, current graphic novels, a lot of them were self-published. They're memoirs, they're narratives that people have created and published online, which I'll be talking about in not too long. But so, yeah.
For example, Chunky. I'm pretty sure the imaginary friend isn't real, but Yehudi Mercado is basically telling his own childhood story.
Spoilers.
Maybe Chunky's real. I don't know.
Yeah.
Chunky isn't real?
Volume 2.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that bringing up the manga classics and, books that were translated into graphic novels is an awesome point, because, I mean, I was just thinking of the graphic novel version, of Mice and Men, where that final scene, like in the movie, how good was that? Same thing in graphic novel form. Like, you don't need words in that scene. In the book, obviously, paints a picture and it's great, but I think just seeing that just really potent images as well will, you have gut drops in graphic novels just the same as any other media. I think it's beautiful and a great kind of different way to see a scene, even one that you can see it coming.
Or in the graphic novel classics are often William Shakespeare, which were originally plays,
yeah,
and then converted into books. This was but they were meant to be performed, and so this is another. So
exactly.
And we have quite a few of them at the Westland Public Library.
Just gonna say, manga classics teen room.
You can access a link in our description down below.
Incidentally.
Okay, Rebecca.
Is it me?
Number 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. The next one is a book that I try to suggest people as much as possible. It's the first in a series, and it's called Delilah Dirk and the Turkish Lieutenant. And it's by Tony Cliff, both author and illustrator. And it is a very just classic adventure story series. Think kind of Indiana Jones. There's always kind of a historical, slightly magic element to all of her adventures. In this first one, the Turkish lieutenant is her new buddy, Selim, who ends up following her on the rest of her adventures. And what I really love, and this is, I guess, a smidge of a spoiler alert, give you a second. There's no romance in this book, which I loved. I loved that they were just a pair of buddies on a trip. To be honest, if he wrote further books and decided to add a romance in later, I'd still be fine with that because they spent some time as friends. And it's just, I met you, I love you. But anyway, Delilah Dirk is in Constantinople to rob a very corrupt and evil sultan. And she kind of literally like falls on top of Selim, and they end up kind of forced into this adventure together. And really what the story truly is about is them finding someone who, even if they're totally different people, gets them. Selim is quiet and sweet and loves tea. And Delilah is brash and adventurous, and she makes a lot of foolhardy decisions. And together they kind of make a perfect pair. And so it's really more the story of their friendship, but there's just this great Indiana Jones style adventure underneath it. Lots of great cart chases. Another thing I love about this story is that it's set in 1807. Like, you just don't get a lot of adventures set in a Jane Austen era. So it's unique. And further books, you learn a little bit more about Delilah Dirk, her background, and you know who her parents are, and that's a really interesting story as well. But I'll leave that for when you're ready to read the second book. But I always like to suggest this one because it is in the teen room. It was definitely written for teens, but I could easily hand this to a 9-year-old and feel totally comfortable. It's really just adventure. There's not a lot of violence. There's no swearing. There's no content because again, just friends. So it's just such a fun, sweet book. I really loved all 3 of them. And so I would highly suggest this book to anybody who just wants a fun escapist adventure.
Sounds great. And again, the art on that one is really fun.
It's fantastic. It's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, but it's very pleasing. It's definitely something easy to take in. The action always, even though it's a still frame, you can just feel the momentum in the pictures. The author / artist did a really good job at, so that would be a tough thing, I think, is to portray adventure in a graphic story like this, and he does it great.
Guys, filming is hard.
Trials and tribulations of filming at the library. I kind of like the halo effect is.
Yeah, now I'm
go towards the lights.
Let's see if this works. Good job.
Thank you.
Oh man.
But to go back to your point, I mean, if Jane Austen is any indicator, there was tons of action going on. The intrigue.
Yeah, I'm talking about physical action, not
okay.
parlor room gossip.
But Mr. Darcy.
I mean, both action-y, yes, but one's quieter than the other. I think Selim would have loved to have sat in a Jane Austen salon room. But fortunately, Delilah is like, nope. We're going to go rob a sultan.
Yeah.
Gotta go have a car chase.
Yeah. Okay. So my next... my next title is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. Smythe, my apologies. It was first published in 2018 and is still ongoing. This almost needs no introduction. It's one of the biggest webcomics out there right now. The full series is available for free on Webtoons, and it's been so popular that it's now being published as a graphic novel. The first one came out, it was supposed to come out in October. I think it's been pushed back to November. And then the second novel, unfortunately, isn't coming out until July because of all the issues that are facing the industry right now. But this has also become so popular that Netflix is developing it into an animated series. At least that's the last I've heard. It is a modern retelling of the Hades and Persephone story and how ultimately Persephone became queen of the underworld. Much like many modern retellings, this is more of a romance and a consensual one at that, instead of a forced marriage. This is more of an attempt by Persephone to leave her overbearing mother. The story is largely set in a modern society, full of drama and intrigue, but occasionally they do their godly duties out in the mortal realm, which is set in ancient Greece. Most of the characters have lived for millennia and fought the war against the Titans, and that is slowly starting to get more momentum in the story. So if you really like the ancient Greece aspect of it, I think that you're going to really find the current narratives more to your liking. Content warning. People have come for the romance, but they have just stayed for the discussion. Sexual assault has become a large conversation in the story, and Smythe has done a good job at consulting experts and tackling this topic respectfully. Episodes related to sexual assault have a trigger warning for those who don't still want to read, but don't want to read that specifically. The illustrations are colorful and delicate, and Smythe is dedicated or has dedicated to her original work and has decided to keep everything in the graphic novel, the published graphic novels, as it was. So you actually get to see the full transition of her artwork over time, which has just been a delight. I love watching transitions like that, since it is published or written and illustrated by her. This is one of those self-published get big stories. It is not surprising that others have also tackled this mythology in the past few years, specifically Hades and Persephone. Persephone, Hades' Torment by Allison and Punderworld by Linda Sajak both have their respective and supportive fan bases. Unfortunately, I haven't read those, so I can't recommend them. But I highly recommend this primarily for teens and older, because of the content warning, but a lot of people have felt that those conversations have needed to be had, and this does so in a matter that many people find that it is not completely off-putting. And that is Olympus by Rachel Smythe.
I think it's really interesting to include a web comic here because it's such a different way to publish, have it come out where the publisher doesn't even know kind of like where it's going, so it's very interesting that I think, and a lot of the bigger companies as well are starting to do web comics, webtoons, just because they're, it's kind of a big thing. I definitely had a few that I followed back in the day in the early 2000s when they were just kind of up and coming. And now you see these authors publishing, having full books. I think a good example is Hark a Vagrant, which wasn't exactly linear, but oh my gosh, if you haven't read it, hilarious.
Another great example, and probably one of the more popular ones, is Ali Brosh, or Broche.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The hyperbole.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, and a half. Hyperbole and a half.
Hyperbole and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
Sara Anderson. Sorry, I might be messing that up. Sara Scribbles. So she does a whole segment where basically she's in college and it's her college experience, which is always really fun. XKCD is another big one. I think One Punch Man actually started as a webcomic as well.
Interesting. Because I know a lot of manga
you can find at your local library.
Yes, but I could talk your ear off about other recommendations for webcomics specifically, especially things that are currently being published. But this is a booming industry. Yeah, whole other video. Booming industry. Webtoons, Top Best are some of the bigger ones, but there's other ways to, get it. I do like that, much like people can do this and put it online and find an audience, and that's what I love about this, is that people have developed a skill, or they're developing a skill, as you can see in Smythe's work, that they're just wanting to put out a narrative and they want to put out their story, and they're brave enough to do so, and then add on top of that the stress of developing an art skill and remaining consistent. And it's just absolutely what I love as somebody who loves art. I love to see that go as you continue throughout the series. So to go back, it's kind of like, wow, this doesn't look completely different, but it is fun to look at the differences.
Totally. That's actually an amazing segue to my next recommendation. Because this book was actually by an artist who I was kind of aware of for a while on DeviantArt, where a lot of us put our art when we were in high school. But obviously, like, you could tell the people who were going places. And this is Stefan Sajak, who has done a lot of, like, even prior to getting work with big companies, has done a lot of, like, Wonder Woman fan art, has a very distinct style. Everybody he draws is gorgeous, so it's really fun to look at. And the book that I am talking about is Harleen. And so that is a mini series under DC Comics, and I wanted to include one from kind of the big two right now, just to show that, you know, even if it's in the superhero genre, there are different subgenres kind of within superhero genres. So this one is all about Harley Quinn, who is a huge character right now, almost a little bit. There's too much. Right now, DC Comics has so many titles that have Harley Quinn in it that it's ridiculous stuff. But this one is, I would say, very different. It's kind of a sidestep from your typical superhero, let's go make a team and fight aliens type of comic. DC doesn't do as much of that anyway. But anyway, this is kind of a look at Harley Quinn's origins, which were originally in the Batman animated series. She was originally an animated character, then kind of broke through to comics, became like a fan favorite, so she's not going anywhere. But this is a look at the origin that was established in the Batman animated series, where she is a psychiatrist. She's working at the Arkham Asylum, where the Joker is being held, and she kind of takes him on as a project, and eventually he gets through to her, and she's the one who kind of ends up cracking. So this is a adult graphic novel, deals a lot with, like, psychology and specifically kind of her side of the story. You do get a little bit of her perspective of the Joker, who is he is a psychopath. There's nothing good about this person. But from her perspective, she sees him first as a challenge and as kind of a mystery, and she knows that he is lying about basically everything. You never really discover anything conclusive about the Joker, but she just makes it her mission. She's going to do this. She's a new psychiatrist there. It's like her first year out of school. And you get a lot of the backstory of her living in Gotham, which is like a terrible place to live. There's so much crime. What is going on, guys? Get it together, Gotham PD. But so growing up in Gotham, and about, like, going to school there, and just kind of the culture in Gotham, where you have this sort of mythical vigilante Batman, and just kind of the frenzy that happens around, you know, kind of the crimes that happen, Batman breaking them up, and people just getting bloodthirsty. And so she's starting to see that, like, Gotham is broken, and Gotham is creating these people who end up in Arkham, and they don't get help. They're just, like, you know, stuffed in a building that is honestly probably not OSHA approved. It's really all creepy. So I think it's a really interesting look at kind of like a more realistic look at her, other than just sort of the typical, oh, she fell in love with the Joker. It's a lot more complex in that. She's kind of, kind of daring herself in some instances. Stuff that he says will be like a little seed that's planted in her brain. Like one time when she's walking home, she like encounters him kind of out in the world before he gets arrested that fateful time. And he spares her life. And basically it's very clear that he does so kind of on a whim, but like she gets in her head. She's like, well, he thought I was interesting. He thought, like there was a reason that he spared me. There really wasn't. But you can kind of see that enter kind of her brain and, stuff like that. So it's really interesting to kind of see her character evolve. And this is written in a time when her character, has evolved past the Joker in the DC universe. She's since kind of left him behind, which I think most fans were happy to see, especially since DC really wants to spin her as an anti-hero now. she's done terrible things, but that's the angle they're going with. So, okay, DC. Anywho, I think this is a great kind of origin story book. Again, the art is amazing. And this was a good segue from webcomics because number one, this guy kind of had his origins in, kind of on the internet. He was a very popular artist, like on Tumblr and on DeviantArt, and, kind of made his way into DC Comics. He wrote and drew and colored this entire book. So, I mean, a lot of times you don't see that in popular American comics. Usually there's like a whole team, but this was like kind of his pet project. And I think it really shows because the story like holds together. It's 3 volumes. It's a pretty quick read. It looks gorgeous, and there's no kind of discrepancies in storytelling or character portrayal, which is awesome because a lot of times in Marvel and DC you run into like new artists. Who's this? I don't know who I'm reading about anymore. So this is kind of refreshing and really a good jumping in point if you're kind of intimidated by the hugeness of the DC universe, which, if you've just seen the movies, probably at a disadvantage because there's a lot to it. So this is kind of a fun read and a good jump in point for that. So that is why Harleen by Stefan Sajak is my last recommendation.
That cover is just amazing.
Yeah, we'll definitely show that.
Yeah, no, just when I saw that is definitely one of the most interesting covers that I've seen come in a long time. It's just beautiful. It was well thought out. I'm glad that they let him do that. It's just great. So
yeah, and he did a lot of variant covers for this as well. So there's a few. So I think so they have the original kind of like, I think they're all pretty much faces, all gorgeous. And then they have like a few different ones that feature different characters. So staying with the variant cover theme that DC likes to do, he did a lot of work, a lot of work for this comic. So
I mean, before we move on though, I need to understand, because I feel like you put out a pretty hot take there. Are you saying today that Gotham's problems are stemmed from a lack of safety and health guidelines?
Yes. Yes, Gotham is a mess. What goes on at City Hall in Gotham?
What Gotham needs is a strict bureaucracy focused on making sure.
And more libraries.
Yeah.
That probably could help, at least right there.
Well, not for spoilers, but Batgirl, originally librarian, I think she needs to get back into it.
Yeah.
So help Gotham from the ground up. Babs, come on.
Thank you, Caitrin. Okay, Rebecca, your last pick.
All right, my last pick, I am going to do kind of a quick shout out because I had a hard time deciding between my last one. This was suggested to me by a teen from my manga club, and they had me read this series, and it was amazing. So I just want to quickly suggest to manga fans, or I would say this is a great introduction if you haven't jumped into manga, is The Promised Neverland. It's a fantastic story, amazing characters, very interesting literary themes that pop up from the Peter Pan kind of universe. It's not Peter Pan, though, I'll tell you right now, not Peter Pan. So anyway, I would highly suggest The Promised Neverland. It has kind of a dark theme, dark kind of storyline, so I really would suggest it for teens and up. There's no problem waiting a couple years if you're a tween, because you might not be ready for it. But the one I do want to talk about is The Tower of Treasure by Scott Chandler. It's from a series of 7 books called The Three Thieves, and it is in our young teen tween collection. It is about a circus performer named Dessa. She's about 14 years old, and she's been traveling with this circus. One of her buddies is a one-headed Etin, which I thought was really cool because the Etin is I think it's a Norse mythology kind of creature. It's usually like a 2-headed giant, basically. And so there's a lot of like, who am I? Where do I belong with our friend? Because he only has the one head, and his people are used to having 2 heads. So you always have this friend with you. And then another kind of scrappy goblin character named Topper. And Topper as they enter the town of Kingsbridge, which is the royal city for their country, Topper hires these two to help him rob the royal treasury. And so Dessa agrees to it, as well as the admin, which I can't remember his name, otherwise I'd give him his name. And they agree to do this. However, Dessa has an ulterior motive in that she has been joining the circus so that she could travel around the country to search for her long-lost twin brother, who was taken by this mysterious man years ago from their home and set fire to the house that eventually killed their mother. So Dessa was orphaned, and she lost her brother in the same day and her home. And so her entire life has been searching for this long-lost brother of hers. And when they get to the King's Bridge, and they eventually make it to the royal treasury, which it happens fairly quickly in the story, so I'm not giving away the ending. She learns that there's much, much more to her story than she thought. I really love this series. The first book was fantastic, but this series is amazing as it deals with grief, what it means to be family, and it has a lot of themes that you see in movies these days. It has kind of a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. Topper is definitely a Rocket Raccoon character. It also, this is a deep dive, and only my dedicated nerds will understand this, but clearly Scott Chandler played Final Fantasy IX when he wrote this book, because there's so many similar themes. I love, we even have kind of that dogged person who's hunting them down, who he's on the bad side, but you can't help but like him. And you see, people change, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right side? There's a lot of question of loyalty and, who does your heart belong to? Is it who you're sworn to, or is it who deserves your affection and your help? I just really love this story. I love the art. The first thing I thought, which was such a weird thing for me to think when I finished the book, was, man, that guy did not waste a frame. Every single picture is used so effectively. There's even, and I hope we can pop this up, there's even a centerfold, basically, of it's almost the exact same picture, like 10 times in a row, with slight variations to kind of elicit this one character's personality and the tenseness in the story. And it's so cool. You think, oh, this is wasting it, but it's not. It evokes so much more than a lot of words could say. And I really like the way that Chandler just uses the space he has to tell a story. It's very dense without feeling like, okay, let's move on, let's get to the plot. He's very effective at that. And it really, I think it helps heighten the adventure, just like Tony Cliff's book did. So I really love this. I love to suggest it to kids. Again, I feel like this is an all ages one. It's, kind of geared towards tweens, but younger kids could totally read it. I think as an adult, I read it and I found it riveting. So highly suggested for anybody who wants to read a good adventure with a little mystery and, a one-headed Etten.
And I was going to say, brother probably doesn't factor into the story at all.
No, we never find out about it.
He's gone.
Totally, just a MacGuffin. No, brother, it's important.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
What brother?
Oh, God.
Thank you. I had to go find that on my phone. I'm like, that sounds so cute. It's so awesome.
Great story. And it's an older one, so I think kids don't necessarily know about it these days. And so I always like to suggest it as something that, one, it'll take care of you for a while. There's 7 books. And 2, it's just something a little bit different.
How's that going, Caitrin?
Sorry. I've been trying to wave my hand.
Automatic lights. Okay, so my last pick is Mouse Guard series by David Peterson. And I chose this one specifically because I owe David Peterson a huge apology. A couple years ago, I had the opportunity to meet him at the New York City Comic Con, and I had been there the first day, and I had seen his booth, although it was closed. And I immediately, when I saw his artwork and looked at the material, I was just like, this reminds me of the board game Mice and Mystics that I've been playing. And I saw that it came out beforehand. But the next day I went back specifically to get a book and get a signature because I was very interested. And I was just like, have you heard of the board game Mice and Mystics? And he kind of froze. And he went, yes. And I'm like, well, that just because I've seen that kind of drew me to your booth. He's like, we were first. Like, not in a condescending way, but it's just like, it's just so you know. And I'm like, wow, that was like the worst thing you could say to an artist. Hey, this thing reminds me of this other thing. And no, he has deep respect for the board game, but it was just really funny. So I felt like I might have offended him, and really that was not the case. It was something that originally drew my eye, but that said, to go into this, Mouse Guard is an award-winning series. It was released as a bi-monthly comic and has since been collected into volumes. The first Mouse Guard is Fall 1152, which combines the first 6 issues. And I think there are about 4 volumes and 1 prequel, and then 3 anthologies, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The series is a medieval fantasy where anthropomorphic animals struggle to survive. The Mouse Guard was formed to protect mice from predators and the harsh environmental conditions that they face. They help provide safe passage, negotiate shipment of supplies, try to stop political upheaval, and help those in need, in addition to all the many, many other side details that they do. If you love medieval history and all the intrigue and political court intrigue, this might appeal to you. This is action-packed, suspenseful, plot-driven series. It is, for those that also like epic fights, there are some, we were talking before we started recording that this was actually placed in the young adult section, and this is for all ages, and there are some really great battle scenes that are just set up in such a way that just draw you into the narrative and draw you into the story. So it's highly recommended for all ages. I love Peterson's use of colors and the realistic drawing style. It's just spectacular to see. In fact, some of the panels actually remind me of kind of a wood engraving that they used to do in medieval times. You get kind of those vibes from time to time. Each panel is richly detailed. Like the background is just, you can just spend hours just staring at the artwork. And in fact, he just sell prints online if that's your thing. As I mentioned, he does have 3 anthologies, and these are actually collections of other people's take on the story, as well as their art. And I just love that. I love that he was so comfortable with his creative property or original property and allowed these wonderful artists and these wonderful creators to become recognized, because they are all just, I love the stories behind them. I love the artwork and the individual styles and the takes. And so it's really fun to see, and it adds to the story, and I love that he's promoting them. So if you get a chance, I think you will, through reading all of these, realize the testament dedicated to the fan testament to the series and the support that it's gotten. So highly recommended Mouse Guard series by David Peterson.
Very cool. You were just saying not to compare it to other things, but it does have Redwall vibes. And I like that. So fans of Redwall might indeed really like Mouse Guard. Because I feel like, it's adorable and gritty.
Yes. Gritty. That's a good way to say it too. Yes.
There's actually a new platformer-looking fighter game coming out. I think it's called Iron Guard.
Let's compare it to all the things
but I mean,
now.
it's literally, it's got, Caitrin and I were just looking at this yesterday. It's got the same, almost a similar illustration style, because I was like, oh, I really like the thick lines on this. And it made me think of Redwall and Mouse Guard. I think it's interesting that so many people are interested in the idea of fairly, not defenseless, but, you think like of mice and weasels and badgers as animals that are just kind of chill on their own, and people just want to put them in battle gear. I think that's very,
because they're so cute.
Yes,
so cute. Look at him with his little sword.
I mean, and I'm not going to go into it. We'll talk about this privately about the board game, so I don't disparage. He was really cool about it, but it was like one of those things that I felt in retrospect could have I'm a terrible fan person. I walk up, I'm like, I like your work. And then like later I'm like, wow, I really wish I would have told them like how I caught all these themes and varieties in their, work and stuff like that. So
Ain't that the way?
ain't it the way you see somebody and get starstruck? Happens to everybody, no matter how famous you are.
But yeah, I do agree. His art is very cool. I do like the kind of the illustrative dark line art that he has in his art. It just makes everything pop. It's a great art style for a comic book, just because it's easy to see the characters depict and everything's still detailed. So love it.
Yeah, and the colors are really rich. So they're like deep reds and oranges, and even once you go into winter, that still comes. He plays with the elements a lot. So.
Nice.
And do you have a last pick?
So I have a few rapid fire recommendations because I kind of went in depth in my two. So for fans, maybe if you've already read like The Wicked and the Vine, things like that, more likely you've read this one, and Wicked and the Vine is a good place to go from there. But Saga has, of course, been around a while. One of my favorite artists, Fiona Staples. Again, everyone she draws is beautiful, I think. Apparently this is what I like in comic books. But so Saga is still ongoing. It's on hiatus right now. So recommend that one. I think there are 10 collected volumes of it right now. And then the other mangaka I was going to recommend was Kaoru Mori. She has one that is an older one that's in the teen room called Emma. This is like not a fantasy. It's just a period romance. That's what it is. A period romance set in Victorian England about a maid who falls in love with a young man of the nobility. But she does great backgrounds, really good detailed period pieces. My favorite one of hers is a series called A Bride's Story. It's all like Silk Road stories, like a collection of different stories. You do kind of encounter some of the same characters, but it's all kind of like just basically kind of marriage stories from this, that, and the other place. But a lot of like, she's done a lot of research on like Iranian, patterns, weaving patterns. She's really good at drawing goats. She says herself she really loves drawing goats, and you can tell like she loves the goats she draws. So can't recommend her enough, just because her attention to detail, the amount of work she does, she writes it, she does all of the artwork. Like, most manga, it's all black and white, but it doesn't feel simple at all. Like the clothing patterns, the rug patterns she draws, all of it, she inks all of it. It's beautiful. So check those out. And those are a little bit more just kind of romances. So if you're not ready to jump into the fantasy sci-fi of graphic novels, there's so many genres out there, and there's one for you.
Yes, we were discussing before we got started how somehow we both ended up on the fantasy side. So
Nerds.
We want to recommend that if you stop by the library, we are actually putting out a book list as well, and there's many recommendations that didn't make it into this. I could go on and on about some webcomics and other comic books, and I know that these two can as well. So definitely come and check that out. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope that you're enjoying the Lib-Con events. If you have a chance, check out the other videos here on YouTube. But also come into the library. Not only are we having some events go on throughout the course of the week, but coming up on Thursday, we have Lib-Con takes over the library. You can come in costume, you can get your picture taken, spin a prize wheel to win some cool stuff. But most importantly, get access to books that you want to get access to. It's a special extended hour between 6 and 7. Any other thoughts that you two want to add?
Nope, I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Share more comic books with you guys in person, because this was a hard cut to make today.
Oh my gosh.
Give us the opportunity to talk at you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day.